Good morning and welcome to the January 18th, 2023 Transportation Infrastructure and Planning Subcommittee. I'm going to call the meeting to order, and our city attorney is going to explain public comment. David?
Thank you, Madam Chair. During citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The open meeting law permits subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So we also have an interpreter today? Okay.
Good morning, Madam Chair. My name is Carmen Cota. I will be interpreting for our Spanish-speaking audience. Please give me a minute to introduce myself to them. Buenos días, mi nombre es Carmen Cota. Yo les serviré de intérprete hoy día. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So our first order of business is approval of the minutes. May I have a motion?
I move item number 1, approval of minutes, October 19th, 2022.
For a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. We now have 3 consent items, 2, 3, 4, dealing with bus changes and our pavement maintenance and green transit technology. Is there any questions? Then can I have a motion?
I move all the items on consent, 2, 3, 4, and 4.
Can I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The motion carries unanimously. We also have information items 5 through 8. Are there any questions on our information items?
I have a question on item 8.
Madam Chair, Chad Makovsky, Aviation Services Director, is here and can answer any questions you have on item 8.
So my understanding is that item 8 is a property that we owned, and we owned it, we purchased it with Luke Air Force Base, or did a 3 partnership, Luke Air Force Base and also Surprise and then us, in order to protect Luke Air Force Base and encroachment and noise and everything else, just to protect the space and area. Now that the legislator has added language to do that, we are thinking, or aviation is thinking about putting it up for sale, understanding that people around there's a lot of questions around that property. My question is why are we not leasing that property, knowing the value of that property is going to go up, and be able to lease it and be able to save property, because we're not in the position to be purchasing property or have the either property's not available and it's costing too much, or we don't have the funds. So that's my question.
And thank you, Chair Stark and Councilwoman Pastor. The Aviation Department has been closely watching that property over the last year or so, and what we've seen is a dramatic increase in demand for that property. We've received a number of inquiries from developers who are interested in that property. We've been working very closely with Luke Air Force Base, and what we've determined, because of those state-enacted legislature, the legislation, I should say, excuse me, that was enacted to protect Luke Air Force Base. Our purpose for owning that land is really no longer, it's no longer necessary that we have that land because of the APZs, or the zoning that's required for that property north of the Air Force Base. And so what we want to do is we want to sell that property. We believe the valuation of the 450 or so acres that we see north of Olive will bring in excess of $100 million to the Aviation Department. And we need that money to actually support our future comprehensive asset management plan, the program that we have for Sky Harbor Airport. So we believe that that's the highest and best use of that land, is to dispose of it so we can take that revenues and use it towards our future capital requirements for Sky Harbor Airport.
So the decision was the decision is made to sell it due to the fact that we need the money up front versus having income or dollars coming in for the next 20 years.
We currently get, it's currently being used for agricultural purposes, and we currently get, I believe, across all 900 acres, about $150,000 a year in lease revenue for that property. We believe, the upfront money that we would get through the disposal or sale of that property would actually help us with our asset management program that we have in place at Sky Harbor.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to, I want the public to understand and also on the record, because some properties we're leasing, some we're disposing, so, thank you.
Thank you, and those are good questions. I appreciate it. So our next item is 9, Scallop Streets update, and I believe our city engineer and our street transportation director are here.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. We are here this morning to provide you an update on Scallop Streets assessment. This is a topic that we have discussed a few times with the subcommittee over the past several years. I am joined by City Engineer Eric Froberg. This item is for information and discussion, so no action is requested today. However, we are planning to bring back a recommendation related to this item to the subcommittee for future action and ultimately for council approval. But before any of this action, we wanted to make sure we got a chance to have a conversation with the subcommittee first. Waiting for the presentation to get up. Almost up. There we go. So first, what are development patterns or jurisdictional changes or boundaries have not been fully built out to their full widths, including vehicle lanes, bicycle lanes, curb gutter, sidewalk, landscaping, and street lighting. These are areas in our city, tend to be in southwest Phoenix and northern portions of the city, but there are different areas throughout the city. They're typically in growth areas, but growth areas where development hasn't been sequential or necessarily planned out. A good example of what we're talking about here, is the photo on the screen on the right. This is it was taken several years ago. This is 35th Avenue between Baseline Road and Southern Avenue. We did a street project here to finish out the east half of the roadway on 35th Avenue, and you can see on the east side a agricultural property there where somebody was growing and farming there. Then I'll show you the change that happened here with that stretch of roadway after we finished our roadway project. After we finished our roadway project, you ended up flipping that parcel into housing, and that would have been otherwise, if we had not gone in there with the city project, that would have been something the developer would have had to pay for the improvements along a policy regarding Scallop Street. Such a policy would help provide a resource and tool to the city to proactively address Scallop Streets or any future development that may occur along a stretch of roadway where these improvements were made. This would also help improve safety by completing out needed infrastructure, and it would also help address congestion where roads have traffic capacity issues. And if successfully implemented, the city would have up to 10 years to recover city cost if properties along that street develop. I'm going to turn it over to Eric Froberg to walk you through the presentation and more details about a Scallop Street assessment policy.
Thank you, Kenny. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Both in 1984, the city adopted a modified version of that, and then in 1991, it was amended again, and that amendment was primarily to allow for the assessment policy to be related specifically to streets. But currently, because of some of the limitations of the current city code, and we'll talk about those, the city isn't currently using the policy. So what are the main differences? In the next few slides, we'll go through that. As far as the state statute doesn't require there to be an existing roadway there at all, where the city code requires at least 60% of that roadway to exist. So when there are instances where there maybe is less than 60% of the roadway in existence, the current city code wouldn't allow us to do that. If we were to revert back to the city code, we wouldn't be limited by that 60%. So that's one main one. When it comes down to what assessments could be allowed, the state statute does allow for a greater portion of the improvements to be included in the assessment. As you can see here, the city code restricts it to paving, curb, and sidewalk only, where if we were to revert back to the state statute, we could include storm drain, irrigation, and some of those other kind of ancillary things that come with roadway improvements. The city code also limits the amount of assessment, so not only can we only have paving, curb, and sidewalk under city code, we can only include within the assessment one lane of asphalt, where the state statute would allow for the full half street. So, and primarily with the scallop streets, we're looking at arterial roadways. So if we were to build the half roadway, which would be 3 lanes of asphalt under city code, 2 of those lanes of asphalt couldn't be included in the assessment, where if we went back to, or if we were to go to model the state statute, then the full roadway segment could be included in the assessment.
I have a question.
Councilwoman?
So I can see benefits and benefits in doing it. My question is, like existing roadway required, are we just trying to match the city code to the state statute? And are we required to?
So, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, Councilwoman Pastor, we are not required to make that change back. What we are asking is the limitations that the current city code, as we look around, and there's a few more that we'll talk about, as we look around where the city code could even be applicable, is a much smaller pool because of some of these limitations of needing 60% of the roadway and those types of things. So we aren't required to. What we are requesting is that to go back to, or to modify city code to more closely match state statute would allow us the flexibility to actually utilize the program.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking is because I'm looking at existing roadway required, and the statute says no, but we have yes.
Right, so under
And I would like to know why the importance of yes on the city code. What the benefit, I guess what the current benefit is, and why it's not beneficial now.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, members of the subcommittee, I think what Eric was, the one part of it, it's not just yes, but it's actually 60% of the roadway has to have been built already. So it does limit you. There are roadways where we have, I think of some things, areas in Levine, where you have 1 lane in each direction. And the ultimate cross-section might be much larger, 3 lanes. And so that would not allow us to be able to use assessment, because 60% of the roadway is not there at this point in time. And so when it says yes or no, that's really to be able to deal with, the state statute just allows you to deal with some of the growth. If you have a road on your street map, like for future streets, the state statute would allow you to assess for building out a half street there, even if it doesn't exist today, but it's planned. And we have a lot of areas, primarily up in the north area of Phoenix, where we have streets on our street classification map, but those streets don't even exist yet today, because there are future streets when growth and development happens in those areas.
Madam Chair, so in this case, the yes under city code is a restriction on the city that limits us, makes it more difficult for us to actually do this. So that's really why we want to see that changed.
Do you want to know? Okay.
And just to follow up on that, there may be instances where maybe, there's an arterial Happy Valley Road exists and the mile south doesn't, but there's 19th Avenue maybe, and I'm just making these up, right? That doesn't exist, but for circulation or those types of things, we, the city, would want to build that road. And then under city code, if that road doesn't exist, we couldn't, but under state statute, we could, and then we could assess, the west side or the east side, depending on which side we decide to build.
Can I ask a question, just kind of in the same lines? I'm sure you probably see this in District 4. I know I've seen it in 3. And there's those incidences where we've annexed property from the county, And so we don't get a full street. We may develop half the street and the other half isn't developed, but in the county, they do have a provision that allows for a greater setback, so for a future right-of-way take. So I can remember when my kids were growing up and they went to a middle school, there was this half road, and it was very tough for the buses. It was very tough for people dropping their children off. In those cases, if you can't get the property owner to go along with trying to fix the scallop street, how often do you do condemnation and then do road improvements? I suspect you probably see some of that in District 4. I know I see it in 3.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it's a great question. I think when we're talking about the scallop streets, and we'll get into this a little bit more, we're not going to apply that for every street that needs to be built out. It's going to be ones where we look for the opportunity to be able to actually assess a future development that happens there. The one you're talking about, that's really, development has happened over decades, and we just somebody never asked for the right-of-way for this property. And so in those cases, we'll have to go and purchase or condemn, hopefully not condemn. To kind of counter that and not to get down the path here, we are working closely with the county. Actually, we just had a meeting in the last couple of weeks where we were talking about just these kind of issues where we have cross-jurisdictional boundaries. How can we work better together to understand, is Maricopa County going to continue to control this roadway, or is it going to be City of Phoenix, so we don't have this split jurisdiction? So we can work better together, so we can request developers to be able to dedicate the right-of-way they need to or improve the right-of-way based on city standards or county standards. And we also have a project that we're working on right now in Council District 7, where just this happened, where we have a roadway that's has a person's backyard, and it's keeping us from being able to widen the roadway. We're actually working through the process to acquire that, to be able to widen out, because it's right near a school, and it's to be able to provide school safety for kids to be able to use a sidewalk rather than the street to be able to get to school.
So you look at it on a case-by-case basis. So if there's a real safety issue, in particular when there's a school in the vicinity, then you'll look at a different action as opposed to trying to use the Scallop Street policy. Okay, thank you.
So to continue through on a few more of the differences between the state statute and the city code, when there are residential properties adjacent to these roadways, city code would restrict anything under 200 feet of frontage would not be allowed to use the code or to use the Scallop Streets policy, where under state statute they do recognize that when you have residential, a single family home adjacent to an arterial, that doing an assessment of a full half arterial wouldn't be fair, but it does say that up to half the cost of the equivalent local street could be, so that 200-foot limitation wouldn't be there if we were to more closely follow the state statute. Now, regardless whether we do city code, the current city code, the modified city code, or back to state statute, these three limitations would apply in either of them. One of them is, and then we just kind of talked about this, that the right-of-way has to exist. So that kind of talks where condemnation and some of those other things would have to happen in advance of the Scallop Street, but any of those costs wouldn't be included in the assessment. Another key one here, and Madam Chair, you mentioned it with the county islands, that it must be within the city. So when we have roadways that maybe have a county island adjacent to it, we aren't able to assess that county island, right, because it isn't within the city. So that does also, especially down in Levine area, right, start to limit the areas that Scallop Streets could be used. Now, during it with annexations and those types of things, some of those get resolved. But when you're looking at just a roadway, and I know we've gotten some questions of, well, why haven't you built this? And we're like, well, because it's in the county type of a thing. And Keeney kind of mentioned that. And then the last one is there is that 10-year kind of 10-year assessment horizon on that. So when the roadway would be completed, and the assessment would be placed on the adjacent property, after 10 years, the assessment would go away and wouldn't be required. And that assessment wouldn't impact the current owner. It would only kick in if that property was then sold for development purposes. So here's just one example, the corner of Lower Buckeye and 91st Avenue, and we highlight that both the west side of 91st Avenue and the north side of Lower Buckeye currently haven't been expanded to the full arterial cross sections, and we just show here that just in this one instance, the difference of what the assessment could include, right? Where city code would allow for 1 lane of asphalt, the curb and the sidewalk, where if we were to modify city code to more closely follow state statute, we could include those extra 2 lanes of asphalt and then any drainage or irrigation improvement. So a quite stark difference in the amount of assessment that could be included.
Councilwoman?
So I'm going to use this example. I see that, I don't know if it's 1 or 2 lanes is asphalt, has asphalt, and then the other 2 do not, or they're just not developed. I can't tell.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it's just that the other half of the roadway isn't built at all.
Okay, so then it's 2 lanes, one way north, one way south.
Correct.
And with the changes from the city code, then we could develop the other 2 lanes. Or we would be able to, we're not limiting ourselves.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, the main difference here is showing that the assessment could include more.
More.
Right? Instead of just 1 lane, the sidewalk and the curb, we could include any drainage features, we could include all the lanes of asphalt, those types of things. So it would be a greater recovery of that as far as the assessment on that adjacent property.
Madam Chair, Councilman Pastor, one of the things to point out there is we would still, if we were going to build out the roadway, we'd still build out the roadway to its full width. It's just whether we could get reimbursement from a future development for the full cost or a limited cost.
Right, because what the statute does, what it provides is it expanded our scope, how I'm looking at it. It expanded the scope to be able to build out more and put the drainage, really, because that's what we need, is we should know by the inner city of how important drainage is, especially out there, and do it right. But we now have the ability to add drainage improvements and get the reimbursement of it. We'll build it out, but then once that area is built, we will then be able to capture those dollars and then be able to continue to improve our city in different ways. That's how I'm understanding all of this.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
So since the last time we came and talked about this, we did go out and we shared some of the proposed code changes which were included within your packet with the development community, and you can see the 4 groups that we reached out to there, and we reached out to them a couple times, asked for any comments, questions, concerns, those types of things. We did just receive 1 comment back, or 1 question back, and it was more of a clarifying comment of, the question was, well, when would the roadways get built? Within the assessment period, and we clarified that the assessment the assessment would only happen after the roadway is built. And I think that the question that they thought we would just put the assessment on and then within that 10-year period build the roadway, and we said no, we would build it and then put the assessment on, and then the 10-year period would start. So really next steps is what we would like to do, and we will come back at a future meeting for action, is to amend the city code to more closely align with the state statute. That would provide us with some greater flexibility by not excluding the types of roadways, having a greater portion of the infrastructure included with the assessment, and then in theory, right, improving our recovery of funds, because again, at this point right now, the code is such that it is restrictive enough that it's difficult to use. With that, we'll stand for any questions.
Madam Chair.
Great, and I thank you. And of course, there would always be the exception for safety reasons, correct? If there's a scallop street and we need to get out there and do condemnation and do the roadway improvements, we still have that. Okay, perfect. Are there any questions? Well, I take it that you can go forward with your amendments. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I believe Keeney is going to remain with us because the next item is yellow light timing, and our Assistant Street Transportation Director is joining. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. We're here this morning to provide you an update on the traffic signal yellow timing field study that we're currently performing. This item is for information discussion, so there's no action requested today. The genesis of this study is related to recent changes made in 2020 by the to traffic signal timing guidelines published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, or as we call them, ITE. The changes made by ITE were somewhat controversial and have spurred significant debate amongst transportation officials across the United States. The City of Phoenix currently utilizes the pre-2020 industry guidance, and the study we are conducting with academic research partners at the University of Arizona is an attempt to collect and analyze Phoenix data relative to the new 2020 IT guidelines on signal timing. I am joined by Assistant Street Transportation Director Brianna Velez, and so I will continue with the presentation. So the graphic you see here on the screen is a depiction of a typical intersection in the City of Phoenix. An intersection like this is a point in our transportation network where two streets meet, and those using the streets, whether they are in vehicle, on a motorcycle, in a city bus, bicycling, scootering, walking, rolling, or using another mobility option, need to use this intersection to get to their destination. In the city, some of these intersections are signalized and others are not. We will be focusing on our signalized intersections today. At these intersections, the signals give direction to the traveling public on how to properly and safely travel through the intersection. For this to happen, it is imperative that the public adhere to what the signals tell them to do and when. One of the most serious issues at our signalized intersections is red light running. This is not just a problem just in Phoenix, it is an issue across the country. Data collected from the American Automobile Association, or AAA, and the Insurance Institute of Highway Safety show the following, that more than 2 fatalities every day occur in the United States due to red light running. They also, in 2020, we had 928 fatalities across the United States and 116,000 injuries in the United States. And then finally, here locally, over the period from 2014 to 2020, we had 113 fatalities and 9,300 injuries in the Phoenix metro area due to red light running. So let's talk about signals. Maybe a refresher on the driver's test we all took back when we were teenagers. First is a green light at an intersection. Not much explanation needed here. Green light means go. So a yellow light shouldn't need much more explanation, but bear with me. When the yellow light lights up at the intersection, this does 2 things. First, it tells you that the green light has ended and you need to take one of 2 actions. Those 2 actions are either to stop or to proceed through the intersection. So this slide shows what happens at a yellow light in a more visual and descriptive manner. You have a car traveling on the road and it has a green light. The yellow light, now the green light for this car ends and the yellow light has come on. The yellow light provides time for the driver to react and make a decision on whether to stop or proceed through the intersection. The reaction time also equates to a distance traveled by the vehicle while this decision is being made. If the driver elects to stop, the yellow light also provides time for braking and for that vehicle to stop safely at before the intersection. In this total, this is a minimum stopping distance for the vehicle when a yellow light flashes, and this is how the yellow light is timed. The Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, or MUTCD, requires a minimum of 3 seconds for this yellow light timing and a maximum of 6 seconds for the yellow light. After the yellow light ends, the red light comes on. The red light tells the vehicle is traveling in that same direction that they need to stop and they cannot continue through the intersection. At all of our signalized intersections, there is something else happening that you likely have noticed. We include what is called a red clearance interval. It is also referred to as an all red time. This is a time where the signals in all directions have a red light. During this red clearance interval, no one has the green light at the intersection. This occurs at the changes between any of the phases at the signal. Again, here's a slide that shows and describes this visually. In this case, a vehicle is in the intersection when the yellow light ends and the red light comes on. The red light clearance interval provides time for the vehicle to clear the intersection prior to the beginning of the green phase and for other drivers traveling in the other direction. It is not a requirement to have a red clearance interval, but it is a safety feature to our intersection operations, and Phoenix uses a minimum of 1 second for this red clearance interval. For this next slide, I don't plan to dive into a deep explanation on signal timing and operations, but I want to give you a simple depiction of how our signals work. In an ideal scenario, the total cycle of our signals would be 2 minutes or 120 seconds. In this example, we have 4 phases in the signal cycle. First, we have a 15-second phase for a dedicated left turn movements in the east and west directions. This is followed by a 45-second phase for through movements and right turn movements for east and west traffic. Next, we have a 15-second phase for dedicated left turn movements in the north and south directions. And finally, we have a 45-second phase for movements and right turn movements for the north and south direction. Then the cycle then repeats itself. As mentioned earlier, the City of Phoenix Street Transportation Department's current signal timing practices are based on a standard operating procedure that follows pre-2020 ITE guidelines. So how does this look in action? Let's put you in the driver's seat and let you travel through one of our more critical intersections, 75th Avenue and Indian School. This is in Councilwoman Guardado's district. The speed limit here is 45 miles per hour approaching the intersection in both 75th Avenue and Indian School Road. You are traveling eastbound on Indian School Road in the leftmost lane through travel lane. You have a green light as you approach the intersection, but you happen to be lucky enough to have the light change in front of you from green to yellow. As mentioned earlier, you either need to react and decide, you have to react and then decide whether you can stop at the intersection or whether you can safely proceed through the intersection. If you opt to stop on the yellow light based on 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, the signal provides you 4.3 seconds to do so. The yellow light comes on, and this is what 4.3 seconds looks and feels like. So you have successfully stopped at the intersection and you see the yellow light turn to red. But unfortunately, the car to your right has made a different decision. They either thought they couldn't stop or just didn't want to get stopped at the intersection. So you watch them pass you and enter the intersection on the red light. They are a red light runner. But based on the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit, the signal provides that car 2.3 seconds to get through and clear the intersection before any green light comes on. This is what 2.3 seconds of red clearance interval looks and feels like. The red clearance interval, as I mentioned before, is a safety measure to protect against red light running. So now going back to the slide I showed you previously, I wanted to make it clear that the 2 minutes provided for a complete signal cycle is an ideal situation. But within that 120 seconds, we have to accommodate not just the green light, but the yellow change interval and the red clearance interval in each of the 4 signal phases at that intersection. And that 120 seconds is also needs to safely accommodate pedestrians' movements through the intersection at their crosswalks. I say that 120 seconds is ideal for a few reasons. You may have an intersection that includes more than 4 phases or movements, like at light rail, or an intersection that has 5 or 6 legs, think of Grand Avenue, or a wide intersection that requires more times for pedestrians to cross. There are a number of factors that can cause a signal length to be higher than 120 seconds. And we all know human nature. The longer the cycle time, the longer someone may have to wait at a red light, then the more frustration that person has, and the more willingness that person has to disregard the signal and run a red light. Well, it gets more complicated than that. We're not just talking about the timing of one signal light. We're talking about the timing of 1,200 traffic signals across our 520 square mile city. You are timing the signals as a system that works and coordinates together. This is a slide that we used in a previous subcommittee meeting a few months ago on a presentation about smart traffic signals. We included it because it shows how Phoenix's growth has complicated signal timing. This is showing a 3-mile stretch of baseline road and the number of signals that have been added over a 15-year period. The impact of densifying development and adding more signals to our system results in competing traffic flow priorities, which leads to longer signals, phases, and cycles, which ultimately hinders our ability to move traffic efficiently. Everyone loves hitting green lights while they are traveling down the road, but the chances of that happening are greatly reduced when the realities of traffic impacts related to our growth are realized. So before we dive into the yellow timing study details, I wanted to summarize how Phoenix currently times our signals. We use the pre-2020 ITE guidelines, which calculate yellow light and red light clearance time. We are consistent in our application of these calculations, and they are based on the road's posted speed limit. But one of the most important factors is that we want to manage driver expectation when they're encountering or reacting to yellow and red lights in an intersection. Now I'm going to hand it over to Brianna to walk you through an explanation of the study.
Thank you, Keeney. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. So in March 2020, ITE published revised guidelines for calculating traffic signal timing. The goals of the updated guidelines were to provide reasonable times for the yellow change and red clearance intervals that will enhance intersection safety, maintain reasonable traffic flow, and provide for the movement of vehicles and pedestrians. In comparing the new ITE 20 guidelines to the prior ones, there are 3 key modifications. First is the use of the 85th percentile approach speed for the yellow timing interval. Because the 85th percentile approach speed requires a study be performed, it can be estimated as the posted speed limit plus 7 miles per hour. The guidelines also introduced an extended timing calculation for yellow clearance intervals for the left turn movements, as well as they adjusted the minimum and maximum intervals to align with the extended timing calculations. So for left turn movements, the recommended maximum is extended to 7 seconds. I do want to note that ITE does state that care should be taken when using yellow change intervals greater than 6 seconds, and that the guidelines should never supersede engineering judgment. One reason for the reference to engineering judgment are the various special considerations that ITE acknowledges must be considered, such as geometrics of the intersection and mix of vehicle types. So let's take a look at the difference between the current practice and the 2020 guidelines for the yellow change interval for the through movement based on the posted speed limit. You will see that the 2020 guidelines increases the yellow change interval between 0.2 and 0.6 seconds depending on the posted speed limit. So for a typical arterial street with a speed limit of 40 miles per hour, under the 2020 guidelines, the yellow change interval would increase for the through movement from 4.3 seconds to 4.5 seconds. Now let's take a look at the difference between the current practice and the 2020 guidelines for the yellow change interval for the left turn movement based on the posted speed limit. Under the current practice, 3 seconds is used uniformly for the yellow change interval. You will see that the 2020 guidelines increases the yellow change interval between 0.2 seconds and 3.9 seconds, depending on the posted speed limit. So for a typical arterial street with a speed limit of 40 miles per hour, under the 2020 guidelines, the yellow change interval would increase from 3 seconds to 5.4 seconds.
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I just want to jump in here real quick. There was one slide that we didn't include here, and it shows where we actually have a similar chart that shows the difference between red clearance times between our current practices and the 2020 ITE guidelines. And what actually we have is, if we adopted the 2020 ITE guidelines, they would actually reduce our red clearance interval. That's because when you use 7 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, you're assuming traffic is going at a faster speed. That means they'll have more time, it will require less time to be able to clear the intersection. So the ITE guidelines would actually tell you to reduce the red clearance time at your intersection based on the assumptions.
Can I ask a question? So these assumptions are made on people actually driving the correct speed, right?
The ITE guidelines make an assumption. You have either a choice of 85th percentile, which that requires studies at each of your different roadway segments, takes time consuming to do that. In lieu of that, because most cities can't do that many studies, instead of the 85th percentile, you can assume the posted speed limit plus 7 miles an hour. So for a 45 mile an hour street that's posted speed limit, the assumption here would be you would have traffic going at 52 miles an hour.
Okay, because no one's going the speed limit, but that's probably another discussion. Councilwoman?
Yeah, I'll wait till the end because I'm going to use your example and demonstrate what I think happens.
Yeah, I would just say, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, there's a lot of technical detail in here, and so I think the staff has just wanted to make sure that there's a solid understanding of what the differences are. But please feel free to slow us down if at any point there's any questions. Don't hesitate to interrupt and ask us what's going on. Thank you.
All right. So as Kenny mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of debate within the industry about the appropriate length of the yellow and red signals in order to provide intersection safety while also maintaining an acceptable level of operational efficiency. Part of the reason why there is no broad consensus is the lack of field studies that have determined its actual effect on safety and efficiency. So that is why the field study the city is currently undertaking in partnership with the University of Arizona is so important. The goals of the field study are to evaluate the ITE 2020 guidelines for yellow change and red clearance intervals, identify the relationship between the signal timing changes and drivers' behavior, determine whether the new guidelines on yellow change and red clearance intervals can enhance the safety of signalized intersections, and to evaluate potential efforts to reduce frequency of red light running events. As part of the study to evaluate the relationship between signal timing and red light running events, smart video detection sensors were installed at 12 intersections. The criteria used to select the 12 intersections were red light running related crash frequency and severity, Maricopa Association of Governments listed of 100 intersections ranked by crash risk, and former red light running camera locations. After ranking the intersections using these data sets, the feasibility of the installation of the sensors was considered. The 12 intersections ultimately selected were the ones with the highest strength that also did not require any upgrades for the installation of the smart sensor equipment. All of the smart sensor equipment was installed and activated in August of 2022. So let's talk a little bit about the data being collected from the MyoVision smart sensor equipment at each study location. First, it's collecting the signal timing data, which contains information about the traffic signal cycle lengths, yellow change interval, and green phase. The turning movement counts, which represents the left turn, the through, and right turn movements that pass through the intersection. And the red light and yellow light running data, which captures each vehicle that entered the intersection during the red or yellow light. All of the data collected will go through a quality control check process to identify and filter out any outliers. I now want to share an example of the red light runner data that was collected at one of these study locations in October 2022 during the baseline data phase. Here you're going to see the yellow phase. Each black dot represents a vehicle entering the intersection during the yellow light. We then come to the red phase, so this is the all red phase. Each black dot within that red phase represents a vehicle entering the intersection during the all red phase. And here we have the red phase with the conflicting green, and each dot within that area represents a vehicle entering the red light when there's a conflicting green during that period. So what does this data look like? So if we take this specifically, this one location during a 24-hour period, we had a total of 433 red light running events. Approximately 93% of those occurred during the all red phase, and 7% occurred after the all red phase, so during the conflicting green. In looking at the baseline data that was collected for the current standards, so this is the baseline data, over a 12-week period, there was a total of approximately 145,000 red light running incidents for all 12 study locations. Approximately 88% of those occurred during the all red phase, and 12% occurred during the all red phase with the conflicting green. On average, the data showed about 250 red light running incidents per day for each intersection.
Councilwoman?
I have a question. Could you please define during all red? What are you measuring?
So, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, the all red phase is the phase immediately after the yellow phase where there is no green for either direction, and it allows the intersection to clear all of the vehicles that have entered during the yellow phase. So at that time, nobody has the green. All vehicles are...
Everybody's sitting still.
Correct.
Okay. And the left turn lane is not happening.
Correct.
And then after the all red, that is when, how I'm interpreting it, is when a green light has now gone on.
Yes, it's activated for...
Unactivated, yes. Okay. I'm just, because if you don't know this and you're listening...
No worries.
And it probably, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, a quick follow-up question. It looks like you did the testing on a Saturday. Was there a reason for that? Is that particular?
So we just pulled one October 1st
So
out
you
of...
did a series. Okay, that's
Correct.
what,
For the entire 12-week period, we collected data every day. We just pulled October 1st, 2022 from one study location, just as an example to share.
thank you.
And Madam Chair, I was just going to add, it probably goes without saying, but the red lights run where there's a conflicting green, all red light running is bad, but the ones where there's a conflicting green is obviously the most dangerous, where you've got cars going in both directions and when accidents happen. And so those are the biggest concern that we want to avoid. And you can see quite a few, not accidents, but red light running with the conflicting green happened. That's very concerning.
So now I want to share some information about the study timeline for the data collection. So it includes two 12-week periods at the 12 study locations. The first 12 weeks ran from September through November of 2022 and was the collection of the baseline data, which had no changes to the signal timing and represented our current practice. The second 12 weeks will run from November 2022 through February 2023 is a collection of the data that represents control sites and treatment sites for the ITE 2020 guidelines. 3 of the 12 study locations will remain control sites and the signal timing will not be changed, while the remaining 9 locations will be divided equally into 3 groups. In the incremental group, the new calculated yellow change interval will be increased incrementally over 5 two-week periods. In the periodically group, the yellow change interval will alternate every 2 weeks between the new calculated yellow change interval and the baseline yellow change interval. And in the long-term group, the new calculated yellow change interval is implemented for the entire 12-week period. So based on the study timeline that was just shared, we are still in the after data collection phase, which will run through mid-February of this year. In looking at the preliminary average data, so the first 4 weeks for the 3 long-term sites, so that is the implementation of the ITE 2020 guidelines, in comparison to the baseline data, so the average of the 12 weeks data, there was a reduction in red light running events at all 3 intersections as shown in the table. While the preliminary data for the long-term sites does look promising, evaluation of all 9 of the treatment sites' data over the 12-week period is important in order to understand the relationship between signal timing and driver behavior, which will identify the appropriate amount of yellow change and red clearance intervals that result in a reduction in red light running frequency.
I have a question regarding that. So you did see behavior change?
In the initial results for the 4 weeks versus the 12 weeks, we do see a behavior change in terms of we've seen a reduction in red light running frequency events.
Okay, and does it, I know you went through the 3, but what were the changes, I guess, is what I'm trying to figure out. Was it a longer wait period of the reds, or?
So, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, so this is for the long-term sites. The long-term sites represents the new ITE guidelines. So when I went over those initial graphs to kind of show the difference in the increase, yes. So we have not gathered or evaluated the data specifically for the incremental or periodically, so this is specifically for the long-term sites, full implementation of the ITE guidelines.
And, okay, so remind me, what are the new IT guidelines that change this behavior?
It actually increased the yellow change interval.
Okay, that's where I was trying to go.
And it varied by speed limits, correct?
Correct.
So this preliminary results show that the new ITE standards are working.
We do show that it is promising. Obviously, we want to make sure we look at, because what tends to happen is driver behaviors, they notice differences, right? And then it changes their behavior again. So that's why evaluating the data for the entire 12-week period is critical, as well as evaluating the data from both the incremental and the periodical sites as well is critical.
So you're saying as drivers figure it out that there's a longer wait, then they're going to continue what's happened in the past and take advantage of the timing, so to speak?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, it could be that, and I think that's the nice thing about the way University of Arizona structured the study was to take 3 different ways of looking at implementing these changes to see what effect they have on driver behavior. Does it a long-term effect? Is it a short-term? And I think that's after we're excited to see what happens after the 12 weeks to see what really happened with these different sites.
So you have next steps. Sorry, we're jumping ahead probably.
So I want to, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, I want to congratulate you for making it through this far. I realize there's a lot of detailed information in a deep presentation that can be a little bit, I can say dull at sometimes. I mean, we're engineers speak. But I want to thank you for your attention. So as our next steps for the yellow light study will include completing the data collection next month as part of our 12-week research period. Then our research partners will need time to evaluate that data and the results of the study, and ultimately make some conclusions about what we observed about Phoenix driver behavior. We will then present our findings along with any potential recommendations based on those findings. And I would remind you that the council back last year approved the Street Transportation Department to participate in a national pooled study to do exactly what we are doing here, to look at the safety and traffic impacts of implementing 2020 IT guidelines. That national study will take some time to complete. And I will also note that we are scheduled to probably come back to policy next week to do a similar presentation on this to the full council. So this concludes our presentation, but before I turn it over for questions, I wanted to cover a few things. One is the timing of this study and how we're proceeding with it. This is going very, very quickly and fast. We're trying to go as expeditiously as possible to be able to see what this impact has, so we can put ourselves into a position of how we might make decisions based on whether the outcome of this study. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about is Phoenix may be the first to do a study of this kind before they implement the 2020 IT guidelines. There's other cities out there and agencies who have put into place the 2020 IT guidelines, but I don't know if any that have actually done a study like this before considering the implementation of them. So I think that puts us in a position that may be a little unique across the country. And also, I think we're most concerned, I want to make sure everybody understands, we in the Street Transportation Department, we're concerned first and foremost about safety. I'm agnostic at best when it comes to what the results of the studies are. If it shows that we think that this has a safety impact to make our streets safer, it makes sense for us to consider and to do this. But we want to be able to be judicious about that and use that engineering judgment to see whether this is going to have that impact we expect. And then I also want to make sure it's very well understood. Increasing yellow timing isn't a zero, I mean, it has other impacts and consequences. So if you increase the yellow timing, there's two things that are going to happen. Either you're going to have to increase the signal length of the overall signal at that intersection, or you're going to have to reduce green light. And both those have impacts on our traveling public. An emphasis on safety is important, but we also, obviously got to understand the impact of what this may do across 1,200 signals across our intersection. And then the last piece I'll say before I stop is we do things in the Street Transportation Department to try to help people, encourage people make good decisions, to influence behavior. But ultimately, we can't control behavior. If people get used to a change to the signal timing, and then they still don't have a feeling of there's a consequence to the action, of there will be a red light running, whether that be an accident or a ticket or something else like that, our concern is that that will not necessarily control the behavior that we're trying to get out there. We still may have additional red light running that occurs no matter how we time our signals. So I think that's my public service announcement for the day, and I will make sure I can turn it over to you now if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So what's interesting is there is a science to what you do, but there's also a bit of art in it because you're trying to predict behavior, human behavior, and I know that can be difficult, so I appreciate that immensely. I know, for one, I'm still going to wait at a red light and not immediately, when it turns green, immediately take off. We live in an area that we need to be in an era that we need to be cautious. So, but I appreciate all this. This is fascinating, and it sounds like there's still some additional steps. Are there any questions? I see that Councilwoman O'Brien turned her camera on, so I'm guessing she may have a question.
I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Keeney, during the changes in the long-term study, does that mean that there is no all red for the intersection?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman O'Brien, no, the all red, we did not change the all red clearance time, so we have not adopted the all red calculation associated with the 2020 IT guidelines. So as I mentioned before, if you adopt the 2020 IT guidelines, the all red clearance time would actually reduce based on our new assumptions. We have not done that. I will note at the end of our data collection period, I think the final 2 weeks, we are actually going to implement the new all red clearance times associated with ITE's new guidelines for that 2-week period to see what the impact is. So we will actually see some reductions in all red clearance times at these at the 9 locations we're changing with the last 2 weeks of it. So we did not make any changes to all red, is the short answer to your question.
Okay, so the yellow clearance time has increased, and the all red has not been adjusted yet.
That's correct.
In any of the intersections. Okay. All right, and I'm sorry, I think you said this already, but when will you be back to us to present again?
So, Madam Chair, Councilwoman O'Brien, members of the subcommittee, right now we're planning on coming to the council policy meeting on January 24th with this similar presentation. We're hoping to have additional data that we can present at that time. And then at the conclusion of the study, and after we've had a chance to evaluate it, we would be coming back to likely either the subcommittee or full council with our findings. I think it's later this spring. I would estimate whether that be April or May. We need to kind of depend on what our research partners, how long it takes them to complete their evaluation of the study results.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilwoman Pastor.
I have lots of questions because really, quite frankly, it's behavior that needs to be changed, and we're really responsible in a way for a lot of this. Not necessarily responsible for the behavior, but in trying to change the behavior. So where I go is behavior. What is going to change a person's behavior? And what does that look like? In one of the spaces or pieces, it talked about speed. So my thought process is maybe we change the speed, because that also changes the timing at the light. All these other variables come into play, because it is a science and it is mathematical, and it's trying to figure it out. Because in changing speed, people then change a behavior in a way where they want to be able to speed a little bit more. So if I'm at 35, I know I have the 10, so I'll go, and I'm just using myself as an example. Not necessarily I do it, but 35, or I'll use my son, who's a new driver. 35, and in his mind, I have 10, so I'm not really speeding until I'm after 46. I won't get a ticket that way. That's how he's thinking. And he went to driving school, so these are, for me, it's more psychological behavior on, okay, if my kid is telling me he knows after 46 he's going to get a ticket, and it's 35, then I'm speeding, right? And then the timing of the light then comes into play. So I know you guys study this. This is a way bigger than me, but that's kind of how I'm looking at in a psychological space of how we behave. On your example of 30, I think it was 35th, I don't know what it was.
75th and Indian School?
75th. Your slide where it was a 2.3, and I heard it later on, knowing that it's a 2.3 to get across, my common sense or my logic would be, all right, all four corners are shut down for the 2.3. And then the activity, or the two seconds, and then the green light for the left and the green light. I also look at it as training us, because it's a new way of shutting it down and letting pedestrians go by where no traffic is moving. So pedestrians can go through, and there is no deaths happening, and we train ourselves that's the way it is. But I don't know. I just know that when I was in Europe, and that's like 20 years ago, that in Switzerland, when I stood at a corner, all traffic stopped. And I didn't understand what was going on because I was talking, and the drivers sat patiently, and finally someone said, "Laura, are you crossing?" And I said, "No, I'm just standing here waiting for everybody." And I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "Because here, if they see someone at the corner ready to cross, all cars have to stop." That's 20 years ago. So I don't know what is happening today in traffic over there, but we have to change that behavior. And at the end of the day, it's enforcement. And I don't want to go to enforcement. I want to go to, we're going to do the right thing. This is how we operate. But those are just my thoughts in all of this, because it's so complex. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Just a quick question. How are you involving our CTC, the Citizen Transportation Committee? I know there's a sense of urgency from some of our council members, but are we keeping CTC in the loop?
Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, at this point we haven't scheduled a presentation for them, but I think that would be wise to do that. We obviously wanted to get in front of subcommittee first and council to let them know what's going on. But with other things like roadway safety action plan and the adoption roadway safety action plan, we've gone back and briefed the Citizens Transportation Commission, so they're aware of what we're doing. But we will make sure we get that on an agenda for a future CTC meeting presentation.
I appreciate that. My appointment is a traffic engineer, so you know he will want to weigh in. I digress. So thank you so much. I don't think there's any other questions, so I appreciate it, and keep us informed. This is really fascinating. Next is item 11, and this is an update on the proposed water conservation measures for new development. And Mario, I'm going to turn to you, and you can introduce. I think we have a whole host of people coming up.
Yes, we've got a wonderful group.
Entourage.
That includes 2 deputy city managers, Karen Peters and Alan Stevenson, along with Water Services Director Troy Hayes, and Max Wilson from the Water Department, and Acting Planning and Development Director Joshua Bednarik.
Thank you, Mario. Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the subcommittee. Yes, we are here today again to talk with the subcommittee regarding the Sustainable Desert City development policy that staff is recommending. When we were before you a month or two ago, we described the policy, and there were questions raised about how the policy, if we were to implement it for existing water users, how that would look. So we wanted to take some time today to talk with you about the conservation programs that are being implemented today on existing water customers. Of course, this is an enormous challenge looking forward as the city continues to grow, and the purpose of the policy is to ensure that we do that in a sustainable way with efficient water use. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to Troy Hayes, our Water Services Department Director.
As we've shown variations of this slide in the past, it shows that our water use over the past 30 years has had a 30% reduction in our per person residential use, as shown in the light blue line there that's declining. During this same period, our population has increased to approximately 1.7 million, as the bars show. The graph in the orange shows that our total average water demand has remained relatively flat over that same period, despite our population growth. And this is mainly due to our customers adapting and implementing water conservation measures. In 2019, the Water Conservation Ad Hoc Committee, chaired by Councilwoman Pastor, identified 14 conservation programs that should be investigated and implemented. The committee, made up of community members and experts, worked over 9 months and identified the best and most effective programs. These recommendations, adopted by the City Council in 2019, are the cornerstone and the roadmap for our current water conservation programs. This council went even further and agreed that the city should help lead regional efforts on water conservation by joining 30 other Colorado River Basin communities by expanding water conservation efforts that include non-functional turf programs and implementation of best management practices. And at this point, I'll turn over to Dr. Max Wilson that will go through our water conservation programs.
Thank you, Troy. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and discuss some of the programs that we have as well as this upcoming policy. In 2019, with the conclusion of the ad hoc committee's work, the city took on a goal of a conservation goal of having sustained reductions in gallons per capita per day. And I think that each part of that sentence is quite important, especially the first one, the sustained component of it. There are many, many things that can be done to reduce water use in cities or in regions. However, if you do those things and immediately after the money dries up or the crisis passes, everything goes back to normal, it hasn't been a very successful or useful use of the city's resources. And so we have always moved, as far as my team goes, towards this goal of having sustained reductions. In order to do that, we need a largely all-hands-on-deck approach where we deal with both the existing users that we have and new users who are coming on to the system. So what I'll be doing now is talking a little bit about the programs that we have in place for each one of these two audiences before handing it over to Josh to talk a little bit about the policy itself. Specifically, when we talk about reducing water use or increasing efficiency for existing customers, it's important that we start by addressing the water use where it is. The easiest way for us to go about finding water use reductions is to focus on the largest users first because they are the biggest pieces of the pie, and then to efficiently apply those limited resources. Again, there are many, many things that can be done to reduce water use. However, they all cost money and they all use staff time, and we want to be responsible with the city's resources moving forward. So to tell you a little bit about where that water demand actually is, I wanted to show you this chart. This is a representation of water demand in the city of Phoenix on an average year. You'll notice that the vast majority of that demand is residential. And as such, most of our conservation programming is aimed at residential customers. Additionally, most of that residential demand comes from single-family homes, and most of that single-family home demand, between half and 2/3, comes from outdoors. And this means that outdoor water use at single-family homes is the single largest chunk of demand that we have in the city, and thus is the piece that we focus on the most in all of our conservation programming for existing customers. Commercial, industrial, and institutional demand is highly variable, and it's important to remember that the name of this category is commercial, industrial, and institutional. This is everything from the city of Phoenix itself to other governments that we serve, such as Maricopa County, to every single business from a mom-and-pop coffee shop to TSMC, and the types of programs that we would have to focus across hugely different types of customers. And then additionally, some of our industrial customer or our CII customers and multifamily customers have dedicated landscape meters. It's important to remember that this piece of the pie does not represent the total amount of water used in landscapes in the city of Phoenix, but rather that is that which is delivered to dedicated meters that we know serve no other purpose. In summary, most water use is from water use indoors at single-family properties, at all of multifamily properties, and at our relatively smaller CII users are roughly equal. And existing large water users are a very small portion of demand, making up just a handful of customers overall. So the logical question then is, what are we doing to match our programs to these demands, and what else could we be doing for our existing customers? I'll run through these briefly. I think it's important to note up front that all of the ad hoc committee programs are either implemented or quite close to implemented. And thus, my staff is working on developing what would be the next steps for all of those programs and additional steps that we can take. This is a list of programs that we currently have for single-family outdoor. You'll notice that it is the longest list of the types that we'll see. That, again, is mapped to the fact that that is the largest single water use that we have. These are largely voluntary programs or entirely voluntary programs aimed at educating folks and getting them to reduce their watering and choose more water-adaptive plants. We're also considering a couple of very important programs in this area. One in particular I'd like to highlight for the subcommittee is dedicated landscaper outreach. Many of us do not make our watering decisions ourselves, but rather contract that out to somebody who helps us. And we think that developing direct educational program for those people is an incredibly important step that we need to take moving forward. I believe we'll have news on how we will do that in the next few months. Looking indoors, this is an area where we have begun developing rebate programs. The ad hoc committee specifically called for a toilet rebate program and a toilet retrofit program aimed at low-income households. We're completing the procurement for the for the retrofit portion of that right now, and are finalizing the programming to be able to handle the rebate components on the systematic backend as we speak. We're considering additional rebates that would be good fits for indoor water uses as well, though toilets are genuinely the lowest hanging fruit, because the difference between the efficiency standard and the current and the historical water use of toilets is quite high compared to shower heads or some of your other indoor devices. Going to multifamily areas, this is again another area where we're looking to expand rebates. Folks within multifamily communities would be eligible for our toilet rebate as we are currently devising it. This is a harder group to deal with, to be frank, because folks in multifamily settings very rarely get to make all of the water use decisions that you get to in a single family home. That's often done by a landlord, and it's often paid on a community-wide bill. And this makes developing programs for these folks challenging, but very important when you consider the amount of demand that it is. Yes, ma'am?
Council?
In the multifamily rebate, why wouldn't we be able to get, I guess, property owners? It wouldn't be managers. It would be property owners to buy in, and then those that say 273 wants to modernize, and they're bought in, and then they get the rebate to go in and modernize the 273. Maybe not all of them, but if I was a multifamily owner, I'd be like, heck yeah, I want every one of my tenants, or I would say every one of my tenants is going to get water reduce, the toilet rebate. So I don't understand how that's difficult, or I'm having issues wrapping myself around that they wouldn't want to engage.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, it's an excellent question. As we develop out those rebates, it is our intention to ensure that the exact situation you're describing is something that a multifamily owner can participate in. The reason why they can be more challenging in many cases than single-family homeowners is that in the multifamily setting, the property owner is very rarely paying the water bill, and as such, they have to go through all the time and effort of doing that upgrade and rebate, but they don't see the benefit because that bill is passed through directly to their to their residents. So if you're paying a single pooled water bill at the end of the month, that all of that cost is borne by the residents, and there's no profits to go to the property manager or owner in the process of doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to give you an example. HOAs. A lot of these new multifamilies have HOAs. There's an HOA bill that they pay, and then through that HOA piece, they pay the water, and they pay the electricity. So for that multifamily, I wouldn't see why it wouldn't be a benefit for them.
Yeah, and so, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor, I agree. In that case, that would certainly be a candidate,
Okay.
and maybe somebody who we'd be looking at reaching out to.
Okay. You know,
Yeah, please.
I'm trying to solve the problem, but go ahead.
Moving into our remaining CII sectors, this is an area where, again, challenges are reached because all of the businesses and institutional areas are so different. I do want to highlight a couple of important steps that the city has already taken in this area. One is the Cooling Tower Revolving Fund MOU that Council approved later last year. That's a project that is quite innovative, and we're excited to see getting off the ground. We have begun to develop funding from external partners to be able to fund those retrofits, and are working to identify partners to actually do the retrofits as we speak. Additionally, we do business and homeowners association checkups, getting to Councilwoman Pastor's previous question, especially when these folks do bear the cost of the water bill. These are quite effective, we find. And I would like to note that our business efficiency checkup in particular has been revamped and updated in the last year to streamline that process for business customers, because we were finding that many of the things we were checking were taking large amounts of their staff time but not leading to action. For example, if you flush every toilet in the entire business, are they really going to change every toilet at the end of that when it takes a huge amount of their staff time to do so? So focusing on those largest water uses first. Additionally, the MOU that Troy mentioned earlier did make a commitment for the city to examine reducing non-functional turf, and we believe that doing this in business customers would be a great first step, and we're looking to expand that program, or to build that program as we speak. Some achievements just to identify as we get started here for what has been done for existing customers. 2022 was largely the first year where we had a fully operational conservation program with all of the ad hoc committee programs operating. We've identified more than 100 million, it's actually up to 140 million since this PowerPoint has been written, gallons of potential annual water savings through the HOA efficiency program. So that's 140 million gallons per year that can be saved into perpetuity just by watering more efficiently, not by taking time to, not by changing out landscapes. We've launched the Cooling Tower Revolving Fund, again, revamped that business water efficiency program, developed and piloted water waste door hangers, and have signed the Conservation Memorandum of Understanding that Troy mentioned earlier. Additionally, we're working on fostering stakeholder support. We've mailed 350,000 water use reports to customers, showing them their water use compared to previous months. The second batch of those are going out shortly. With the Green Team, we hosted conservation-focused green bags, educating hundreds of city employees on drought and conservation. These were actually so successful that we managed to crash the city's industrial WebEx account with so much demand from employees to learn about these issues, and it's a badge of honor in a way, I guess. We've implemented the Conservation Media Day, hosted the Colorado River Town Halls, and I think one that we're particularly proud of, developed mobile elementary school water festivals during COVID-19. When we weren't able to bring the students to us, we came to them instead. So that's what we're doing for existing water uses. For existing water users. For new water uses, we have to look at developing policies to ensure that new development fits with our portfolio and does not need imminent upgrade. As is probably becoming clear at this point, it is much easier to build things right in the first place than to go back and fix them after they have already been built to reduce their water use. And I think this next the policy before you today goes a long ways towards this end. And with that, I'll hand it off to Josh.
Can I just pause for a moment? So it looks like we've done quite a lot with regards to existing water uses, but I think we probably could still warrant some additional discussion at a future agenda. I know I had chatted with you about working with Valley Partnership on commercial water and trying to recycle it and use it for landscaping. And so I'm curious as some of those programs that we're looking at, and perhaps prior to coming back, maybe you can meet with all the council and get some ideas, and then we can have an additional conversation. Again, what you've done is great, but I think there's more dialogue necessary. I know one of the councilwomen hosted a water summit, and there was a lot of good information at that as well. And so I think maybe in a couple months we should come back and revisit what we're doing with existing development. I know today really is about new development, but I think some of this proposals you have really warrant more discussion. I don't know. So, and I see Councilwoman O'Brien has turned on her camera, so she must want to speak. Yeah. Councilwoman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I just would like to go quickly back to the over 140 million gallons of water that have been identified through the HOA efficiency program. I hope that we can start tracking to see how many of those HOAs switch over. So it's wonderful that it's identified, but where and when will we begin measuring the true impact there?
Councilwoman O'Brien, yes, I completely agree. Our staff person who's responsible for that right now is already beginning to translate these into 2022 numbers, updating based on last year's savings. Initial results have been a mixed bag so far, so we are developing programs that will help incentivize people to go further. Some of that will likely be recognition programs, things to recognize the people who do their part, and other pieces of it may be falling into some of those non-functional turf reduction commitments that we alluded to earlier.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chairwoman.
Thank you, and let's turn it over to Josh. I know you've been working on this, and you have some great suggestions. Oh, one more question from Councilwoman Pastor.
It's the non-turf piece, because I know non-turf requires water. And depending on what type of non-turf, and I know this from Phoenix Union, depending on the non-turf and what quality it is, it may require more water than having grass. So I think we need to find a balance.
Yes, and Chairman and Chairwoman, Councilwoman Pastor, I completely agree. It does. How much water savings you get from a turf conversion program are entirely dependent on what it's replaced with and how that's watered. Our partners and friends at Southern Nevada Water Authority found in their turf replacement program that when folks switched from turf to xeriscape, so a desert landscape, they saved about 55 gallons per square feet per year. So it's quite a bit of water, but that is not the same thing as if you're converting to, I think, a artificial turf circumstance like what you're describing at Phoenix Union, where the cooling components of it can be incredibly water intensive. So absolutely, we will need to make careful adjustments.
Yeah, and I would hope, because I'm assuming this is what's happening, is that we would look at what turf quality or turf, I don't even know what I'm trying to say, but it has to do with the turf and seeing which ones are the best for our climate, but also which ones would use less water.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I think the councilwoman's already started her list for future discussion on existing development. No, that's a good comment. I appreciate it. So, Josh.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. A large portion of the policy is dedicated towards creating a foundation for best management practices for new development. We're proposing to break this effort into two phases. Phase 1 is the development and implementation of stipulations for rezoning cases. Phase 2 is to take the lessons learned from the implementation of those stipulations to update our codes, ordinances, and processes to make the best management practices standard requirements that could be applied citywide within a targeted geography or for a specific type of development. As we talked about last time, the best management practices are focused on 9 different areas, from drought-tolerant landscaping to preservation of open space. One change we have proposed in response to our last discussion is an update to the language in the draft policy regarding swimming pools. We are now calling for enhanced standards for swimming pools to give staff a broader approach on how to partner with rezoning applicants on how and where we might apply these types of standards. On the screen is a snapshot of the codes that we could look to update as part of Phase 2 of this effort and making the best management practices standard requirements. So that includes our zoning ordinance with our landscaping requirements, building code with water efficiency, and our drainage design manual for green infrastructure components. I'll turn it over to Mr. Stevenson to close out.
Thank you, team. Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, staff asked for approval of the revised Sustainable Desert City Development Policy regarding new development and water usage. Approval of this policy will allow staff to continue with a robust discussion with all the stakeholders to evaluate the proposed changes to new development, pilot how many of those may be implemented on a site-specific zoning case process, and then work with the stakeholders to refine those and ultimately, make modifications to the city code. With that, staff is happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And I look at this as a start. I mean, these are good suggestions, and we need to be ever vigilant and look at other issues with regards to new development because it's always evolving. But I want to thank you because I know we have to start somewhere. Kind of reminds me of a text amendment in the zoning ordinance. Sometimes we make a recommendation and then we find a couple years later we may have to massage or amend that. And I think we're going to have to do that with new development and have a continual dialogue with that. But I do appreciate the recommendations you're making. I think Councilwoman Pastor, you have some comments?
I think it's great that we're going down this way, but I also, because of we know what the crisis is, and our governor did demonstrate that we're in a bigger crisis than what we think we are, or how we're playing and acting. And so I think things need to move quickly and place, especially in new development. I also want to look at current development. And so this is for new development, but in other areas to look at current development and what industries we would like to attract that don't require a lot of water usage. And I think that's a future conversation for council, but I know that's some of the dynamics that we have been discussing.
Actually, if I can just follow up on what she said, I think that's a great suggestion. I think maybe as you go through the process, if you could just give us like a quarterly report on what you're doing with your recommendations so we know what's going on in new development, but then maybe regroup and discuss about what we can do for existing development, because I agree that's critical. And I know we're all under the gun, and I know you guys probably feel it more than us because you live it. I mean, this is your issue. But water, we hear it from our constituents day in, day out. First water leak, I get all the comments like, we live in a desert, what are we doing? So I think we need to have that meaningful discussion. But again, I do appreciate what you're suggesting today, and I realize this is a bad pun, but this is a fluid issue, and that we need to keep discussing it. So, and I think you had something to add, Alan?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilwoman Pastor. Both excellent comments, and yes, it really is about starting that discussion and working with all the stakeholders to implement them in a manner that is something we can be able to track and show this is the improvements that are being made, but at the same time evaluating those as they may have other impacts for things like housing affordability, workforce attraction. All of those things need to come into some balance as we are evaluating this, keeping an eye on the fact that the state of Arizona and the city of Phoenix have had a long history of making sure that we address wise water usage. We know that in order to build the fifth largest city in the country, we had to be wise with our water usage. And so we've always done that, and adoption of this policy will continue in that same vein and allow us to work with all the stakeholders and the council on how we do that.
And I would say, and not to belabor this, but I think I've heard Councilwoman Pastor say this, that we're talking about behaviors, and I think the tougher discussion is current development and what we're doing, even as residents of the city. And so it is a tougher discussion, I think, to have than future development, but I think it's critical. And again, behavior, we talked about it on the timing of lighting is also an issue when it comes to water. So did you have anything to add?
No, I just wanted to thank you for the work and continue it. That's all I have to say. I was going to make a motion.
Okay, please make a motion.
I don't have the slide up.
Here, I've got it right here.
Okay. I make a motion, staff request that the TIPs recommend approval of the Sustainable Desert City Development Policy as revised. I got to get that in.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Say nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you again for your hard work. And just if we can take a moment to congratulate Karen Peters. She's saying no, but we're going to congratulate her. She is moving on, and she's going to work for the state. So we're very proud to brag that she came from the city of Phoenix. But good luck in your new ventures. I don't know if you want to add anything. I know you've known her as long as I have.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not leaving yet. I do have a few more weeks, but I appreciate very much the thought, and it will be a very difficult thing to do, to leave this very important work behind. So I just want to give the team the kudos that they deserve, that you have given them, that this work needs to continue, and I'm proud to have been part of it. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Congratulations, Karen. You have put your passion in sustainability and also in water usage, and have been a champion in doing it. So appreciate it. Your work will live on. It'll be documented and continued to be happening within the city. So appreciate your work.
And I see Councilwoman O'Brien. Did you want to add?
Yes, thank you so much, Chairwoman. Congratulations, Karen. It has really been an honor to work with you. I know we have a few more weeks together, but I do appreciate all that I've been able to learn from you about water in my time on the council. And I hope we will get to continue to work with you in your new role at the state. So thank you.
Thank you. And now we turn to call to the public. Have we had anyone join us? Okay. And we have future agenda items, and I believe one will be talking about existing development and how to tackle it with regards to water conservation. Are there any others? Then we are adjourned. Thank you.